Welcome to my draft analysis for the League of Extraordinary Trainers Season 14 Master Ball Division. My name is Zach Parrott, coach of the Exploding Wilmers, and I am here to defend my title, I guess, as the reigning champion of the Ultra Ball Division. Let's jump right into the draft analysis and see what I've picked for myself. This time, rather than through the Pokemon Showdown Team Builder, I'll have myself present and I'll have the Pokemon on my team sort of floating along in the background as we do this draft analysis. To start, I was 4th pick in the draft, and I knew I wanted a really strong Pokemon right off the bat, and when I saw that Iron Valiant was available, I knew I had to pick it. Iron Valiant is a Pokemon that I haven't used in a while, and it's one that I really wanted to get more experience with in draft. I know what Iron Valiant is capable of. My problem with using Iron Valiant personally is that I feel like I get way too attached to the speed booster energy sets, and I feel like I neglect other sets that it's capable of running, whether that be Specs, Scarf, Band, Calm Mind, Swords Dance, or something else. Iron Valiant has a lot of flexibility in what it can run, and I really wanted to learn more about how I can use Iron Valiant, especially because I've gotten a lot of experience with building with different types of Pokemon over the past few months. So I think that picking up Iron Valiant here is going to be a really, really solid start to my draft. For pick number 2, I ended up going with Gholdengo. Gholdengo is a Pokemon that I had in Season 12 of the LET Ultra Ball, and I had it as a Terra Captain there. It's not going to be a Terra Captain this time, but when I saw that coming back on round 2 and, coming up on my round 3 pick, that Gholdengo still wasn't taken, I knew that I really wanted to redeem myself with Gholdengo. Gholdengo is another Pokemon kind of similar to Iron Valiant, where I feel like I get stuck on certain kinds of sets. In my case of Gholdengo, I feel like I always need to run this super fast offensive set, when Gholdengo's bulk and typing allows it to do so much more than that. I really wanted a good steal this round to pair with Iron Valiant, and something that I knew could come to a whole lot of drafts, and Gholdengo provides just that, in addition to just being a ridiculously solid Pokemon on a lot of fronts. From here, I knew I wanted some hazard support to help with my team, and I also wanted a Pokemon that can help take some Ghost, Dark, and Psychic hits that might be thrown my Pokemon's way. This is why I picked Ting-Lu for my round 3 pick. Ting-Lu is a very bulky Pokemon, and of all the ground types I've drafted in, draft this generation, Ting-Lu is probably the highest tier ground type that I've drafted the least outside of Landorus Incarnate. And I think that with Gholdengo and Iron Valiant, I can afford to pick up a really bulky Pokemon in Ting-Lu, as not only do I have the speed control with Iron Valiant to threaten more offensive Pokemon, but I'm also able to prevent my hazards from getting removed through Gholdengo. So it makes Ting-Lu just a really, really great Pokemon for my team. Iron Valiant Gholdengo Ting-Lu is a known core in standard 6v6 singles play, and so being able to pick that up here is huge, and should allow me to have a really solid start for most weeks, ideally. For round 4, I still hadn't picked up a Terra Captain yet, and I knew I wanted a high-tier Terra Captain that could carry me in a lot of matchups. When I saw that Urshifu Rapid Strike was not only allowed to Terrastalize, but still up on the board, I knew I had to snag it immediately. While I do already have a fighting type with Iron Valiant, Urshifu Rapid Strike is a Pokemon that I have some experience with already, as it was one of my key team pieces in winning the Ultra Ball division last season and doing it without a single game loss. And Urshifu Rapid Strike with Terra is just, quite frankly, disgusting. Terrastalization in combination with Swords Dance was a big reason as to why Urshifu Rapid Strike ended up getting banned from standard 6v6. So being able to have all of those tools available to me here is going to be a huge boon. And combined with the fact that I already have a lot of support through Ting-Lu's bulk, Gholdengo's hazard prevention, and Iron Valiant speed control, it really should open the way for Urshifu Rapid Strike to clean up teams. Urshifu Rapid Strike is also nice because it can be a momentum gaining piece. So far, I haven't drafted a single Pokemon that has a pivoting option, and so by having Urshifu Rapid Strike on my team, I'm able to get that sort of pivoting that I can use to bring in Pokemon like Iron Valiant or Goldengo a little bit more safely, which is super valuable. Following up Urshifu Rapid Strike, my next pick ended up being Noivern. Going into round 5, there's a few things that are very apparent with my draft already. First is that I do not have a ground immunity at all, and while my team isn't necessarily weak to ground, you definitely want to have at least one ground immunity on any good draft. And I knew that I really needed to prioritize a good one so that I'm not left out to dry and searching for a lower tier one that's just harder to bring in a lot of matchups. Noivern was on the board, and just like Urshifu Rapid Strike, Noivern was also a member of my lossless team from last season, although I didn't pick Noivern necessarily for that run back factor. Noivern actually just fits incredibly well into my team. For one, not only is it a ground immunity, but it also completes the Fairy Dragon Steel core with Iron Valiant and Goldengo. 2, it provides a little bit more pivoting with U-turn, which makes it just that much easier to bring in a Pokemon like Iron Valiant or Goldengo, or something along those lines. 3rd is that it provides defog. Right now, my team has no hazard removal, and while that's not necessarily the worst thing, as you are more than capable of winning draft leagues without hazard removal, me personally, I always like to err on the side of safety and pick up at least a little bit of hazard removal so that I at least have that option to play a little bit more of a bulkier playstyle. I come from a time in Pokemon where balance and heavy-duty boots weren't, or where balance was like huge and heavy-duty boots wasn't a thing, and so having a way to remove hazards is incredibly valuable, and so I really valued Noivern for that. Noivern, like Iron Valiant, can also function as speed control as it's very fast, and although it's not the strongest Pokemon in the world, still being able to have that speed is super valuable. So Noivern just checked all the right boxes for me, and I felt like it was a very natural pick to have on my draft here. For my round 6 pick, I ended up going with Hisuian Zoroark, and I made it one of my Terra Captains. Honestly, of all the picks I drafted this draft, Hisuian Zoroark is probably the one I'm least satisfied with, and the one that probably doesn't fit my team quite as well as a lot of the other Pokemon. However, I wanted to have another Ghost immunity that wasn't just Tinglu's resistance, as although Tinglu can hold up on that front, having the flexibility to not have to rely on Tinglu to be able to handle Ghost types is really valuable, and Hisuian Zoroark provides that for me. Hisuian Zoroark also provides a potential win condition with Nasty Plot, some speed control with a Choice Scarf, or just that unpredictability factor with Illusion, and awesome utility moves like Will-O-Wisp, Knockoff, and U-Turn. So, while Hisuian Zoroark is a bit of a question mark, especially as a Terra Captain this season, I want to give it the chance on this team to express itself and show what it's capable of. Alright, so I'm not the biggest fan of super duper hyper offensive teams. I like to be able to have at least a little bit in the way of bulky pivots so that I'm able to control the battle in a way that makes me feel comfortable. And while Goldengo and Tinglu can do that, and Noivern can also kind of do that to some extent, I did want to add just a little bit more bulk to my team. I'm also currently lacking a grounded poison type, meaning toxic spikes, especially if Tinglu isn't running heavy-duty boots, are going to be brutal for me. And so I knew I wanted my next pick to help me with that. Vileplume was the Pokemon I ended up picking here. Vileplume is a Pokemon that I've always respected a lot as a physically defensive Pokemon. While its stats aren't the greatest thing in the world, it's still more than serviceable as a physical option, and combined with its access to Strength Sap, it's surprisingly very difficult to remove. Vileplume also has a lot of options like Leech Seed, Stun Spore, Sleep Powder, Toxic, and other utility options that it can use to really mess with my opponents and not just be a passive wall type of Pokemon. I really like Vileplume as a physically defensive counterpart, kind of to Tinglu, although Tinglu is a very physically bulky Pokemon in its own right. Just being able to eat hits and deal good, or it can deal good damage, but being able to eat hits and wall out Pokemon was exactly what I was looking for, and just absorbing Toxic Spikes is really nice too. So Vileplume is sick. For my round 8 pick, I ended up going with Regieleki. Regieleki has a lot of interesting tools that I thought would work really well on an offensive team like mine. Screens are the immediate thing that jumps out to me, as it provides support for Iron Valiant, Hisuian Zoroark, and Urshifu Rapid Strike to potentially be able to get a boost off and start going through my opponent's team. However, that's not all that Regieleki is capable of doing. Rapid Spin is really nice as an extra form of hazard removal, though not super duper important. But the big reason why I wanted Regieleki is that it pairs extremely well with Urshifu Rapid Strike. Regieleki forces my opponent to bring a bulky ground-type Pokemon in prep, or at least some electric immunity. A lot of those bulky ground-type Pokemon get really abused by Urshifu Rapid Strike, so if I'm able to play well, predict my opponent to bring in bulky ground types, I can potentially get free entries to Urshifu Rapid Strike and start firing off really strong attacks, or potentially even setting up. It's this synergy, combined with the fact that Regieleki's speed tier, once again, makes it a really, really solid revenge-killing Pokemon. It just made sense to pick it up here as the 8th member of my team. For pick number 9, I felt like I wanted another offensive Pokemon, but a Pokemon that still had some form of utility, and when I saw that Volcarona was still on the board and fairly cheap, only about 11 points, I knew I wanted to pick it right here. Volcarona is an interesting Pokemon in draft for me, as it's not one that I've really used a whole lot, and when I do use Volcarona, contrary to what I've said with Iron Valiant and Goldango, with Volcarona, I'm actually a lot more willing to mix it up and go outside of the Quiver Dance sets. I, in particular, am a big fan of choice sets on it, and even bulky sets have some utility as well. Volcarona can be pretty decent with utility options like Will-O-Wisp and U-Turn, and there's of course always that game-ending potential that Volcarona provides that can just be incredibly threatening for my opponents. Especially with support from Regieleki, I felt as though Volcarona just made sense to pick here. Combined with Vileplume and Urshifu Rapid Strike, it also completes the Fire, Water, Grass core, though that was a little bit less of a reason for picking up Volcarona, and more that I just wanted another really strong special attacker that had some utility. Alright, for my last pick, I have a little bit of sauce here. So, going into round 9, I want to say, it was around the time I picked Regieleki, I noticed that with Urshifu Rapid Strike and Hisuian Zoroark as Terra Captains, I had exactly 1 point left over for a Terra Captain. This means that I could pick up a 1-point Pokemon, and if it was a 1-point Terra Captain, I could still make it legal for my draft. I ended up looking through 1-point Terra Captains, and I immediately had my eyes set on this Pokemon. So I ended up picking it up 10th and then just filling in the 11 pointers with Volcarona. But for my 10th and final pick, I picked Trapinch. Trapinch is a Pokemon that I am also a very strong believer in. It's a Pokemon that, yes, it is a baby and isn't the most diverse Pokemon in the world. It's pretty predictable on what Trapinch wants to do. But Trapinch is a Pokemon that, especially with Terastallization in its pocket, I think could maybe force a little bit of prep. The biggest thing with Trapinch is that you can give it like a Focus Sash or an Eviolite or something like that, and if you're able to get it in safely, you can use it to trap one of your opponent's Pokemon and then KO it, clearing the way for some of your other offensive picks to shine. With Terastallization, you can even expand this a little bit further, as with Terra Bug, First Impression becomes Stab, and then all of a sudden, Trapinch can kind of function a little bit as a revenge killer. It's kind of funny. So, I saw that, and I was like, well, I'm not going to get a whole lot more value out of that 1 point, and instead of going for maybe 2 mid-low tier mons, I figured going for one pretty good mid-tier mon in Volcarona and one bottom tier 1-point Terra in Trapinch would be my best bet, especially with the more offensive team I'm drafting here. So that concludes my draft analysis for the League of Extraordinary Trainers Season 14 Master Ball Division. This is going to be a really fun season, and I'm definitely branching out with my team style. Compared to last season, where my team was very much more of a balance / maybe bulky offense type of build, this build is very much a bulky offense in terms of Tinglu and Vileplume, and just having a lot in the way of fast offensive Pokemons with a couple of pivots that I can use to maintain some momentum or get some momentum in my favor at the very least. So this is going to be a really exciting season, and I'm really excited to see what I can do with these Pokemon and show that I can pilot teams that aren't just, super balanced, basically. So I will see y'all next week for my Week 1 match.